She stood frozen in the narrow aisle, the accusing stare of the flight attendant cutting into her like a blade. "You can't sit here," the woman said sharply, her voice louder than it needed to be. A dozen heads turned. Strangers' eyes traveled from the dusty boots to the worn jacket slung over her shoulder, lingering on the single duffel bag that seemed too light for someone who had just come home from somewhere far away. The cabin air felt heavy, almost electric, as if the entire plane had paused to witness this moment of quiet humiliation. The soldier did not answer. She simply tightened her grip on the strap of the duffel and looked past the attendant to the empty first-class seat she had been assigned. Her ticket was in her hand, crumpled slightly from the long wait at the gate. The paper trembled, not from fear but from exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that ran bone deep, the kind that wasn't solved by sleep. Her eyes were calm, but there was something in them that unsettled the crew member, a quiet, unspoken refusal to be small. From the back of the cabin, a murmur rippled forward, a few passengers shifting uncomfortably. No one spoke up. Not yet. The soldier stepped aside, wordless, letting another passenger pass, but her gaze never left the seat. She had been told before to move, to step aside, to wait her turn. She had done it for years, in deserts and mountains, under burning suns and endless stars, while the rest of the world slept safe. But this seat, this small square of fabric and space, was hers. Her name was Lee. Once long ago, she had been just another girl from a small town where everyone knew everyone, where the air always smelled faintly of pine and wet earth after summer storms. She had enlisted when she was 19, drawn by a restlessness she could not explain. Her father's old Navy cap still sat on the mantel of their family's modest living room, gathering dust. She wore it the day she left for boot camp, the first time she held a rifle. She remembered the smell of gun oil and the strange, sharp satisfaction of understanding it completely. Years passed in sand and blood and silence. Lee learned to lead. She learned to lose. She wrote letters to her mother and tore them up before sending them, unwilling to let her see the fear hidden between the lines. Her team became her family. She had carried one of them, a boy barely 22, across a rocky pass under gunfire, feeling every labored breath rattle through him until it stopped. She had been the one to close his eyes. At night, even now, she sometimes woke to the memory of his dog tags clinking against her chest as she ran. Now, standing in the narrow first-class aisle, she felt all of that rush back, not as memories but as weight. The weight of everything she had done so others could sit here without fear. The attendant's voice was quieter this time, but no less firm. "Coach is that way. You'll need to move." Lee did not move. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than words. The passengers could feel it, a stillness that seemed to expand, stretching across the cabin until even the children had gone quiet. Someone in the back coughed a nervous sound, but still no one spoke up. As the attendant reached for the ticket in Lee's hand, a sudden shift in the air caught everyone's attention. The cockpit door opened, and the pilot stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with silver just beginning to thread his hair. His eyes swept the cabin quickly, the way a man does when he knows something is wrong before anyone tells him. And then he saw her. It wasn't her face that made him stop. It was the mark just visible on her shoulder as the jacket slipped slightly. A simple black ink design, worn and faded, but unmistakable to anyone who had ever served. A SEAL Trident. The pilot froze mid-step. The entire cabin seemed to sense something shifting. He did not speak at first. He simply stood there, one hand braced against the doorframe, staring at the woman in the aisle. Lee said nothing, but her eyes met his and held. There was no plea there, no anger, no demand. Just quiet recognition. The kind that passes between those who have seen the same darkness and walked away from it. The pilot stepped forward slowly, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the plane. "She stays." It was not a request, it was final. The attendant blinked, startled, but stepped back. The silence that followed was unlike the earlier one. This silence was heavy with realization. The pilot turned to Lee, and for a brief moment, something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, respect, maybe even apology for a world that had asked too much of her and given so little back. He reached up, adjusted his cap, and said only one more thing before stepping back into the cockpit. "We don't move warriors to the back." Lee lowered her gaze, the smallest nod of acknowledgement, and slid into the seat. The leather was cool against her skin, but somehow it felt heavier now, as though it carried the weight of more than just her body. Across the aisle, an elderly man took off his hat, holding it over his heart. Another passenger followed, and then another, until half the cabin sat in silence. Heads bowed, no one spoke. It was not a moment for work. The flight attendant, flustered but quiet now, offered Lee a glass of water with hands that no longer trembled with authority, but with something closer to reverence. Lee accepted it, her fingers steady. When the plane finally lifted into the night sky, Lee stared out at the endless dark beyond the window. The world below was scattered with lights, small, fragile sparks of life. Somewhere down there, families were gathering for dinner. Children were laughing. Someone was whispering a prayer before sleep. She had fought for all of that, and she would do it again. For a moment, she thought of the boy whose dog tag she had carried, of the names carved into the memorials she had touched with calloused fingers. "This seat isn't just for me," she thought. "It's for them." When the plane touched down hours later, no one rushed to stand. The passengers stayed seated, letting Lee rise first. It was a small gesture, but in that cabin, it felt like the whole world had just taken a knee. Respect isn't about applause, Lee knew. It isn't about medals or headlines. It is about quiet moments where dignity is returned to those who carried the burden when no one was watching. If you're watching this, now you know the feeling. The quiet pride, the stillness that speaks louder than words. Let us know where you're watching from, and share this story with someone who believes that respect should never have to be demanded. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is exactly what Lee did: stand silent and refuse to move.